discussion of the airport prior to our moving to the rest of our agenda. And so with that, I'll open the conversation. Do I need a first or second on this, David?
No.
No. Then I'll open the conversation to discussion on the airport. Len, why don't you lead off?
Well, I think before us is some data that our financial director has taken quite a bit of time to prepare. It's given us a historical perspective of revenue and expenses with regards to the airport dating back to 2012. And I would ask now that if Jeannie would just kind of walk us through this data.
Sure, I will. Thank you, Len. Thank you, Mayor. I've given you two reports. One is airport history from 2012 to 2022. This summarizes the operations and the capital projects. The second report, which I'm not going to go over in detail with you now, is the detail of all the capital projects. I will leave that for you to read. Each capital project on this report is broken out with the funding source and what the title of the capital project was. And that, again, goes back to 2012. Any questions on any of those projects, please let me know. But there's quite a bit of information there, and it shows you a good history of all the investment that we have done into the airport since 2012. So I would just like to highlight the other report, the very first one that says operations. The first section are revenue sources. We have basically two revenue sources on an ongoing basis, and occasionally we receive state aid and federal aid for the operations. And you will see the airport fees and rentals. This is where we collect revenues from renting the hangars itself. And the second line is airport commissions on sale of supply. This is airport fuel sales. And it's the margin between the airport fuel cost versus the taxes that we have to pay to the governments, and what we have to pay for the fuel versus what we charge to the customer. And you will see that, as David mentioned earlier, 2021 and 2022, the net, you're going to see increased activities in the airport sales from the prior years during either construction and or during COVID itself. So from 2012 to 2022, we've had over 1.1 million of revenue sources. Part of that was for federal and state aid, where we received ARPA aid for CARES aid for loss of revenues because of COVID. And we also received federal aid for the purchase of the airport tractor. That is what the 249,000 represents. And then the next section of the report are the operating expenses that are adopted in every year's annual budgets. It has personnel, equipment, any type of professional services or purchase services that we have to have there, maintenance, insurances, and related fringe benefits for our employee. Years ago, we used to have a company that ran the airport for us, and then under Dick Miller's administration, he eliminated that, and we brought on the airport commissioners, and then we also brought on part-time personnel. We also have an agreement with Mr. Bentley at the airport. He's basically at the airport all day long, and he maintains hangars for us. He also he and Mike Stevens help with the airport traffic, with the airplanes landing and parking and things like that. So we have a lease agreement with him. He rents some of the hangars, but he also has non-fuel sales, which he receives 50% of the net. It's the sales less the credit card commissions, and that is a nice arrangement for us to have him on site there all the time with the aid of Mike Stevens.
What was the FBO charge? Do you remember? Wasn't it around $50,000 a year?
It's been so long, Len, I haven't looked that number up recently.
That's an approximate number.
Yeah.
I just remember.
In that neighborhood.
Yep. Okay. So it just kind of shows you where we're at for cost.
So you will see since 2012, we've had expenditures of 1.2, a little over 1.2, which is a net deficit of 115,000 over that time period. However, I'll point out 2021 and 2022, we had a $27,000 surplus and a $22,000 surplus. This is before taxes are paid. Now, because the airport sits in different municipal jurisdictions, such as the town of Lawrence, the town of Milford, and
Leona, Lawrence, and Milford.
I was thinking there was a third one involved, but we have to pay taxes on this property. And so you will see there that it averages around $32,000 to $34,000 a year. So that brings the net operating deficit over those years up to $474,000. But again, 2021 and 2022, it was a $7,000 deficit and $11,000 deficit. And then the next line, I show you what we have transferred to capital projects from the general fund since 2012, and that totals $332,000. That's our local matches for any of the airport grants that we've done. Now, we were fortunate during COVID that FAA covered 100% of 2 or 3 of our major capital projects, which saved the general fund quite a bit of money. So then, if you flip the page, this is a summary of the capital projects. So this list here is detailed on your other report. And you will see that since 2012, we've had 4.6 million excuse me, in expenditures in our capital projects for our airport activities. And this report details the type of project that was done. It also shows you the state aid or federal aid or the general fund revenues that funded those projects. And if you go to the third page, it's summarized at the bottom, kind of in the center. It will show you that we received $403,000 of state aid, over $4 million in federal aid, and $230,000 in the general fund.
Excuse me, Jenny.
Yes.
If you look under 2012, the general fund,
Mm-hmm.
you have, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but you have listed as the total 10,278.
Yes.
But in 2012, it was 10,278 for the general fund for drainage improvements and soil stabilization, but also general fund Johnson Controls, 102,436. So should that total be 112,714 there, which impacts the total at the right side of the page? And if I'm correct, it would be, instead of 230,156 and 34 cents, it should be 332,592 and 34 cents.
Let me double check that when I get downstairs. Let me double check it. Okay?
Yep.
Yeah, because if I was to read this correctly, we would actually be ahead of the federal monies, right? Our expenditures is 4.6 and our revenue would be 4.7, so today's point.
Well, that is because it has to do with timing.
Mhm.
So there's an overflow from year to year.
Sure.
So it just has to do with timing. And you will see when you read the detail of the capital projects that some of them the expenses are going to equal the revenues perfectly, some of them are not. And it just has to do with the timing of the projects. Also has to do with if we return some of the funds back after the projects are closed. And then it also has to do with if we send over our local match right at the beginning of the project, and if the project is still in progress, those funds are sitting there but have not been spent yet. But I will double check that, David.
Right, like the fuel farm, we haven't expended the fuel farm yet.
Correct. And then also at the bottom of page 3, you will see the current capital projects in progress and also the outstanding applications.
So just to kind of give the council a little perspective on the fuel farm, we have gone to bid on that 3 times. We've rescoped it 3 times. We've gone from having 2 tanks to now we're doing 1 tank. And we're doing jet, not avgas, because of the need is greater. We sell more jet fuel than we do avgas, and then the profit margin for the city is higher with the jet fuel than it is with avgas. So,
Okay. I'm sorry, if I can just back up, David, I know the answer now, because after I read this, the 102,436 for the Johnson Controls, that was debt. That was on the installment purchase. It didn't come directly from the general fund. That's why it's not in the general fund total.
Okay.
Back in 2012 and 2013, we did what we call the Johnson Controls Energy Performance Project, and they did weatherization, they put on new roofs, they did certain things with windows and things like that. And that was the airport portion. That was a debt that we took on, and we have been paying that off for the past 15 years. So that's why it's not in the general fund total.
Gotcha.
So there's a lot of information there. I always say that on my presentations to you. Read it, absorb it. Any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. One thing that we have a lot in our office is detail, and I can drill down into detail and find any questions for you.
so on the AWAS, there's a little over $1 million that has been granted, but we haven't expended that yet. Farland & Johnson is in the final stages, and that is a automated weather observing station. So in that particular grant, we were granted more money than what the engineering firm has projected, even through the last couple of years coming out of COVID. So, and that was one of the ones that was paid for, correct? 100%. We were awarded that.
On the A-West, I thought it was 900,000, 100,000 local.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, I think, yeah. And for full disclosure, one thing that is not on this report is the 50th anniversary. There was some fundraising for the airport, which went into a reserve. That I didn't include that on this report, but I can always provide that if you'd like it.
It wasn't much, was it?
It wasn't big dollars, but it was still a airport activity.
I only remember it being 4,000 or 5,000. It wasn't. It's not.
No, it was more than that.
Really?
Yeah, because right now we've got about, I want to say about 9,000 left of it. But I don't remember the beginning number.
Further conversation?
Do you want to talk about the taxiway?
Yeah. Let's.
So, on the taxiway, what we experienced with it was just the total opposite of what the fuel farm was. The fuel farm became frustrating because we've been given an amount of money by the FAA and state DOT, and we thought it was well within the parameters. Under the guidance of McFarland Johnson, we thought we had this. The bids came back, they were literally double what we were given for a grant. And so we rescoped it and shaved away a lot of part of the project and got it down to the bare nuts. We went from, I guess, the Cadillac to almost a Yarrow, if you're old enough to remember what a Yarrow is.
Showing your age, pal.
Yeah. Remember the cardboard doors? And so I was like, great, we're going to get a fuel farm. It's definitely not aesthetically what we thought we were going to get, but we're going to get it. And the bids came in even more than the first round. And I said to McFarland, we're actually going backwards here. We've scaled this thing down to a point where we should have met it. And at that time, that was coming out of COVID, it was in 21, and it was just, prices just kept going up and down and all over the place, and they couldn't get any control of it. So we made the decision as a commission to move to one tank, and we prioritized jet. As I stated earlier, jet is where we make a lot more money. Jet is what we're seeing more activity of. We're seeing more charter aircraft because of all the tourism that's happening. The folks that, Cooperstown All-Star Village, they're folks that are coming in. It's been pretty impressive. Even this year, it's been impressive of the type of aircraft that comes in. I actually was up there at 11:15 this morning. I took a picture of 3 private aircraft that had just landed this morning that are sitting there. And again, once you get to charter aircraft, I want you guys to understand that these are folks that are working for a corporation, that they give you a credit card and they don't think anything about the cost. Whereas if I owned an aircraft, I would come in and I'm going to buy 50 gallons of fuel, and it's not much. These guys are buying hundreds of gallons of fuel, and we're talking thousands of dollars. They're buying jet fuel for $7 a gallon. So there's opportunity with the charter aircraft. Well, what happened with the parallel taxiway is the bids actually came in, all of them, under what McFarland and Johnson thought had recommended. And so, not knowing where construction costs are going to go, we were pretty excited about it. So this is information that I wanted to share with you guys that maybe you didn't get. That as you're looking at the data that Jenny has provided about the financial state of the airport, whether or not the parallel taxiway phase 1 would be a worthy project. Now there's 3 areas that the airport makes money in: fuel sales, hangars, land leases, and then a little bit on tie downs, or landings, and that's not a lot, but there's some there. Phase 1, if you guys remember when McFarland Johnson was giving the talk, was all the way down at the 2-4 end, and it seemed kind of odd, right? Why would you start way down at the 2-4 end? What about closest to the main hangar? And the reason why they did that is that it actually opened up approximately 10 acres of land that the FAA is willing to invest in to start creating space for hangars. And that doesn't mean that we're buying or building hangars. It means it's an opportunity to lease land down there for folks to build their own hangars. But the FAA is paying for the apron space. So that blacktop that's in front of it, that's what the FAA is agreeing to. We have people that are interested. Mike Stevens relayed to me just 2 weeks ago that there was a couple that came in. More and more people are moving from the city, we know that, and migrating up. There's a couple that they work in the aviation industry. And they were looking for land to lease at the airport because that's what they like. That's what they want to be able to go back and forth to New York City with. I think that's just the beginning of it. The charter aircraft was brought to my attention a couple of years ago. We actually have local people that use charter aircraft on a very regular basis. Where their frustration comes in is because of the runway. And I think somebody mentioned earlier about why are we doing the taxiway? Well, the FAA led that discussion. I had no choice about it. I even tried saying, okay, you're looking at the taxiway, but for the charter aircraft, I need the runway extension. And the FAA was not entertaining that at all. They want the parallel taxiway put in, and then we'll enter into the discussion of the runway extension, which right now we need 800 lineal feet. That math is the new math for the aircraft that's flying. They need 5,000 lineal feet. We're at 4,200. So we actually have people that are private that are willing to have a discussion of creating a public-private partnership about that, because they're the folks that are using the charter aircraft. And so when I relay that to the FAA, they're excited about that. They're excited that we have that type of activity at the airport. So I just give you guys this information just to kind of consider, is this project worthy enough? I conferred this with McFarland and Johnson, and I recognize you guys told me that money is very tight. So if we were to decide to move forward with the taxiway project in 2023, we would be looking at expending approximately $50,000 out of the $225,000 that the city would be guaranteeing. And that's what the FAA is looking for, is that they want to know that the city of Bonnie Island is guaranteeing the 225. But, can you say that again, Lynn? So if we were to move forward and put our application in with the FAA, saying we want to move into phase one, what I'm being told by McFarland and Johnson, given where we are in the year, the calendar year, we are 5%. We would expend approximately $50,000 worth of work in 2023.
Thank you.
Yes, Mark.
Len, you mentioned the FAA is pushing parallel taxi, but I didn't hear kind of a reason for it. I mean, I understand that extending needs to, follow a parallel taxiway, but what is the rationale? I mean, looking at it, recognizing I'm a layman in this, but, the numbers have not justified that we have so much flights landing every day that we have to have a parallel taxiway to be able to accommodate, and safety was mentioned at our last meeting. Thinking it's pretty safe when you've got an average of one landing per day. Double it, and you're still pretty safe. Why parallel taxiway?
Yeah, great question. I think I've asked that one multiple times, but to the FAA, they wanted to see the taxiway put in first before we start increasing anything. They're recognizing that we're seeing more charter aircraft, and they want to see the taxiway in. It wasn't my decision. With Rob and Glenn, these are the FAA folks that we talk with. This is where they wanted to go in all of this. So it wasn't left up to the airport commission to recommend moving forward with the taxiway. It was the FAA recommending. They recognized the AWAS, which was old, that needed to be replaced. They recognized the fuel farm that needed to be replaced. The apron needed to be replaced. And they're suggesting that the taxiway is the next thing to work on.
So recognizing that the taxiway seems kind of like a means to an end, and the end being a longer runway, more hangar space. I noticed that and hangars are like one of our main sources of revenue at the airport. I recognize that over the last 10 years, the airport fees have remained relatively stable. Does that represent maximum rental? No. Okay.
So for where phase one is down there towards the 2-4 end, we're looking at folks that they're paying an average of $14,000 a month to hangar their aircraft south of us, 3 hours south of us. And so given that opportunity and that we now have more folks that are approaching us, we see as an opportunity to make that a different type of air park.
Yeah. I guess my concern is how much we're going to invest in order to make that back in possible rent.
And so I guess the last part that I need to put out there is in having these discussions with the mayor and Greg and David and others. Taxiway now, CEO, has a grant writing company that he uses, and he suggests that the ESD will fund that 5%. So where I've been frustrated, and Ginny knows this, I've been frustrated where I look at other money that the federal government has given us. Schumer has actually guaranteed us, I think we're at $463,000, divide that by 5, and that's how much we get each year. That I can't take that money and move it over here for the match. Or if the AWAS doesn't spend all $1 million, can I use that money for the match? They won't let you do those things. The FAA won't let. But yet ESD, according to Jody, we can write an application up, and he feels that we'll get an answer probably around October that would not only pay for phase one but pay for phase two's 5% match. So that is an opportunity for us. And he sounded very confident to me about that. So
Is there, I understand that we have a July 15th deadline.
14th actually.
14th.
Yeah.
In my experience as grants, you can have annual grants. What is the status on this? Is it an annual grant? Every 2 years, every 5 years? What's the cycle on this grant?
So Rob cannot confirm that we're going to get it. But we meet all the parameters that they're looking for.
That didn't answer my question.
I don't know how else to answer this
It's a
without.
it's a one-year cycle.
Oh, is that what you meant?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
He said, how soon could you reapply?
Right.
If we didn't apply, if we didn't have a complete.
Right. If we don't do anything,
Thank you.
Yeah.
sorry, I misunderstood you.
Translated real nicely.
But if we do that, we run the risk of going back to the field farm, and that I'm very hesitant of, since I went through it 3 times with the field farm. And we're gonna go for the 4th time in getting bids for the single tank. We still have to do that for the field farm, and that's why on this paperwork that Ginny's given us.
Wait, I'm sorry, you left to the fuel farm and I missed the connection.
My experience, we had enough money with the fuel farm from the federal government to get what we needed, a tank of jet and a tank of avgas. But when the bids came back, they were twice what we were allotted. And so what we've experienced before, even in the apron, when the apron was done, Ginny, do you remember the numbers? Were the aprons close to what the federal government was going to grant us?
I believe that all of the airport projects that we have done since 2012 have been within or very close to the approved grant.
Right.
I think it's just been in recent years with the fuel farm and maybe even with the AWAS where there's been a major difference. But you will see that and when you look at the history of all the capital projects and the detail, it's been very close.
And so I'm just hesitant that we have an opportunity, because the bids have already been made, we're below what the federal government is granting. So we have a very good shot. You're absolutely right. If we could do the 1-year cycle, but we run that risk of, will we stay under it? And that's all I wanted to present to you guys tonight, is that I'm very hesitant, given my past experience with the field farm, which is, one of the more recent issues that we've been trying to get through, that we could potentially be doing this again, where we're not granted enough money given the bids because of price of labor and price of materials.
Glenn, it's my understanding with this project, this parallel taxiway has already been bid, so we have an actual bid number, which is what the application is based on. So if this were to not be, we didn't go forward now, we went forward next year, wouldn't we redo that process, bid, get the numbers, and then we're applying? So if the costs go up, we would apply for more money, right?
That's not what was explained to me, but okay.
Okay, I just don't understand, if the application is based on a bid price and we apply next year, wouldn't it be based on the bid price from that time?
I know that McFarland and Johnson looked at what it was gonna cost, then they went out to bid, and the bids met that expectation. And because McFarland and Johnson turned in their estimate to the FAA. The bids came in under that, and they're ready to award someone. If we go back out to bid next year, that whole process would be done again, running the chance that the bids are higher than what.
So there's a cap, essentially, on how much the FAA will fund?
I'm understanding that McFarland Johnson turns over their number to the FAA, and the FAA looks at that, and that's what's approved.
Would that estimate process happen again, though, from McFarland and Johnson?
Yes,
Next
we would
year.
go through the entire process again next year.
So there would be a new estimate?
Correct. We don't get to use the bid that was,
I see, but your concern is that their estimate might not account for a rising cost?
correct. My concern is that the bids will come in higher, and we won't meet what the grant for the FAA is. I hear what Greg is saying,
I see.
but this is what it was explained to me.
Couple questions. First of all, didn't we have a discussion about the parallel taxiway a few weeks ago, and we had decided to not question I have is, and financially, I don't see anything that's changed since then. But the other question I have is taxiway versus the runway. I have my suspicions why they want the taxiway done before the runway, but this might sound like a dumb question, but why were we looking to increase the length of the runway? Are we looking because of the number of jets we have come in? Are we looking for bigger planes to come in?
So the chartered aircraft that is utilizing the airport the most, they need 5,000 lineal feet. That's their math.
And they don't have that now?
No, we have we're 4,200 lineal feet. We need to get to 5,000.
So who is coming in right now?
They come in on a sunny day, but they can't come in if there's just a little bit of a mist. Sorry if I didn't explain that
So
well enough.
is the FAA thinking that before you increase the length of the runway, you need to increase the taxiway because they're expecting bigger planes to be coming in?
They're always looking for safety. So to Mark's point, you could justify that if you had one aircraft that made the mistake of coming down while one was coming in, you would have an issue. I don't write the FAA guidebooks, I'm just giving you the conversation.
I mean, I understand their logic, and it makes sense for an airport that has multiple planes coming in every day. But since we're averaging, I think we average, well, before the pandemic, we were averaging one a day. And a significant number of those, I mean, you know, they come in over the summer, they come in for baseball camps, and then there's a huge number that come in for induction weekend. So, I don't know, I'm still not sold on spending this money, even though, and I understand it would be only $50,000 this year, but I'm not sold on jumping at this, considering the expenses we have coming up, including in your very own ward with that water project that's gotta be done. And I understand 225,000 is only a drop in what's probably needed to take care of that. But, I just don't see a reason to jump at this right at the moment. And I've been a supporter for the airport since the beginning, but this one just doesn't make sense. If you build it, they will come, but they're coming in one day. So I don't see the reason to build it yet. Maybe in another year or so. I mean, looking at the numbers, the fuel sale numbers went through the roof last year. Do we have an approximate of what they are right now, halfway through the year?
I did, I'm sorry, I didn't bring that with me. And also, one of the parts that is not in this report, just because I didn't have time to put it all together, is I can actually give you a report that shows you the number of transactions that have happened. And I could even get down in the detail of how many planes repeat, but I don't know if you really need that information, but I can tell you exactly how many credit card transactions have happened at the airport by year. And I also have another report that shows how many gallons have been sold. And I should have included that, and I just forgot. I was working on audit today when I was requested to provide this, so I'm sorry it wasn't 100%.
Jenny, could your, with that report that you referred to, could it also generate what the average sale is per each one of those credit card sales?
You mean dollar-wise or gallon-wise?
Dollar-wise.
I probably could do both.
Okay, that'd be helpful as well.
So, and
I can tell you that I had Mike do his calculations, and it's not Ginny, but from Mike's perspective, they've sold 6,250 gallons of jet fuel this year to date. So that's $2 profit per 6,250 gallons of jet fuel and 3,500 gallons of avgas to date. And we're making $1 profit off of av, and we're making a $2 profit off of jet. So that's what, 12,500, give or take.
Total fuel prices for the year?
Well, that's profit off the jet, and then 3,500 for avgas. mean, my goal has always been to get the airport to cash positive. And last couple of years, minus the taxes that we pay to 3 entities, and I'm open to suggestions on how to handle that. You know, $34,000 a year is a lot of money off the airport. I mean, we have a great bunch on the airport commission. I mean, one of our members is an engineer for another company, an aviation company. So we have that specific knowledge, which is great. We have Mike Stevens, who is a great employee, and the other folks that are making up the commission are doing a very good job. So, I mean, we're blessed there. But to David's point, I guess what is the metric that we're looking for? Is it always profit, or is it volume? Is it a combination of the both? You know, I would be lying if I told you that, and I already said it earlier tonight. I would rather see our runway extended before we did the taxiway. And I've had this discussion multiple times with the FAA, but this is the basket I've been handed, and so that's where I'm at. And I can actually see from your perspective of why you guys are hesitant. And I don't know what else to say or present. I think the numbers that Ginny has presented, I mean, this is the most in-depth of airport numbers we've ever had before, so thank you. I mean, literally.
Sure.
Yeah, it's phenomenal what you kicked out here today, so thank you.
Len, what I would like to see, I mean, the last 2 years have been really good years. When you look at the 10-year span, something definitely shifted in 2021. Last year with the fuel sales, I mean, I would love to see the airport break even or close to break even. The fact that we've had 2 years where we're near breaking even, I think is great. I think we need something like getting a little closer to breaking even before the council can look and say, you know what, let's invest another $225 and get this taxiway and then extend it. But even then, it's still if you build it, they will hopefully come, unfortunately. So I'm not quite there yet, but I would love to see that this happens within the next couple of years.
I have it in my briefcase if you guys don't remember the visual, but in phase 1, there is literally a service road as part of phase 1, and that is the catalyst of getting those folks out to their hangar space. So to your point, and that's what I'm focused in, is getting us cash positive. If we can get out to that 10 acres and start developing that space for hangars, private hangars, folks that are building. I mean, I brought back to you guys, I believe, Eric was an individual that started flying into our airport about 5 years ago. He wanted to build a $750,000 or $1 million hangar. And that's what was the catalyst of me working with Gary and David to get to the land lease. So that individual, his company expanded so quickly, it went public, and then he sold out. But there's other folks, that couple that I just mentioned, they're looking for land to lease to build their own private hangar. There's more of them. You know, when I spoke to, I'm not going to use his name, but he's a representative at the county board. He used to work for New York State DOT, the aviation division. He's like, Len, there's so many of those folks that you can't find a space in the airports that are south of us. If you just went down there, they would build. So we have an opportunity to get down to that business part that we should create. But to do it, it's phase 1. And so you're absolutely right. I have no guarantee. I cannot hand you guys the golden egg. I don't have it. I can just tell you the conversations that I've been having, and the opportunity that's there is, you're right, $225,000 is a lot of money for us. But we have an opportunity to get to that business park and get it up and running. And if I have an opportunity to start selling land leases, then let's go for it. But that's up to you guys. I'm just one vote.
I missed the get to the business part.
So phased, sorry. phase one is not just a parallel taxiway, there's a service road that's being built.
So you're saying the business park within that space?
It gets us down. See right there, that area right there. So this is a green road, this is the hangar space, so the service road gets us down to that business park. So this green road right here gets us from the main hangar, this is our main hangar, these are our lower hangars. This gets us out to this business park and you can start leasing that service. That's part of this phase one project. And this is the area that we can start doing land leases with. I
So-
have pictures of that.
So that's not something that's in the future, that's included in this project?
That is part of phase one that we're looking at right now. If we invest in phase one, we get this service road, we get to the business park, and we get a taxiway.
Yeah, thank you.
No, I'm still thinking, I'm more just making a disclaimer rather than asking a question.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
If a private party builds an $80,000 hangar out on the other side of the airport, that's gonna increase our property taxes, right?
David?
Value of the property goes up. Lawrence starts charging us more property.
Yes.
Taxes go up?
Yes. Assessed valuation, just like you build a bigger house.
I have another question. The business park, is that on city land or is that on one of our neighboring towns?
City land. We own it.
Okay.
We actually have about 462. We actually have about 462 acres of airport property, which attaches to, Greg, was it 1,000 acres of city-owned land? I mean, we should know this from the deer management.
2006 or something like that, yeah.
So it's, so the airport itself, I think it's 460, 462, somewhere around there. Well, I mean, the taxes, there's other ways, creating a partnership with another municipality that's larger than us. There's annexation, there's other ways of, maybe negotiating. I'm assuming that they got kicked in there when this was being talked about and the deals were being made back in the late 50s. Because there's multiple parcels that make up that. I mean, if you ever look at the airport property, you gotta wonder why there's so many zigs and zags all over the place. I think there were 6 property owners that had to be bought out. And so I'm thinking there was some handshake deals that were made back in the late 50s, but I don't know. Wasn't around. Even back then, Luke, I wasn't around.
Can we talk about the seeker for a second? It's just really close to Wilbur Lake, and I haven't had a lot of time to go through this before right now, but I'm noticing that some of the impacts on surface water have moderate to large impact. Is that on our reservoir or other bodies of water?
The largest body of water next to it is Wilbur Lake.
Right.
I guess I would lean towards Greg on this.
I didn't prepare this, McFarland Johnson would have to speak to that.
I know of no other water source other than just off airport property. There's a small body of water. I would call it a swamp. I don't know what the technical term is.
Oh, it's on the other side of the road, right?
No, not off of Airport Road or Wallace. I know what you're talking about on Wallace. That's not impacting this. This is as you're heading down to the 2-4 end.
Okay.
There's a little body of water right there, but it's actually created from the water runoff that we have up on the runway area. Well, all the swales and gutters that we have in there, that's where the water's forced to go to.
Is there any further discussion on this conversation? As David, I need your ears. So as I see it, we have a prioritization of one motion over another in sequence. That would be that the speaker be sat before a motion to approve the parallel taxiway. Correct? Am I correct, David?
Yeah.
And so we have, do we have an option of getting a consensus on motion 4 before moving to motion 3, which is the seeker, or do we need to go to a vote?
It's an interesting philosophical question. I mean, you can make motion number 3 and see where it goes, and then that would be a pretty good indication as to whether you went to 4 or not. It's got to go to.
Sure.
You can't pass 4 until you've done secret.
Exactly. All right, Mark?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion table, given this does not feel like it's an urgent exercise. And I appreciate all the information. It's a lot we need to digest here today. I think I'd like to, my thinking, hold this off a little bit longer, as there's a lot of information that we need to keep getting in. I'd like to understand fuel sales for the remainder of this year, but I'd like to make a motion table.
You table the
To
motion.
table the entire agenda, or to table?
No, you can't table the entire agenda. You have to table the motion, which is number 2.
Yeah, number 2.
Number 2.
One second.
And that's a non-divisional motion.
All right. Which then brings us,
The clerk would call the roll.
oh, I'm sorry.
The clerk would call the roll on the motion to table.
I said you would, please.
Sure.
Councilmember Murphy,
Aye.
Davies,
Yes.
Brisberger,
Yes.
Parsons,
Aye.
Carson,
No.
Overby,
Aye.
Falco.
All right, which brings us to motion 3.
Motion 3 is moved now because you cannot move on motion 3 until motion 2 has been satisfied and that's been tabled. So motion 3 is moved.
And then that brings us to motion 4. Motion number 4, that the common council approve the following resolution. Federal Aviation Administration.
That's also moved.
I cannot do that. I was looking for your,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought there was only
some
2.
reaction.
I didn't realize it was.
In that case,
I thought 2 was number 1 and 3 was number 2.
that was my understanding, too, but that's good. So, we'll close the moot. We now found ourselves at the end of the council meeting. Yes, Chief?
I would just like to say, I'm going to update this. I'm gonna investigate your question, David, see if I have a formula error on there, and I might
Well,
modify the general fund.
if it was a bond,
Well, it
maybe
is
just
a
label,
bond.
then maybe just label it bond instead of general
Yeah.
fund and
So,
that would clear
I'll
it up.
update that. I'll also get the report out on the total number of sales, the total gallons sold. Cause I've got that history also going back to 2012. And I'll reprint all of these, and I will, if it's okay, I'll distribute them at, council next week. And if you want me to, I can recollect these unless you wanna just keep your notes. So, it's totally up to you.
All right, that said, if there's any additional business or anything for council discussion? Hearing nothing, then I will give this to you folks.